Welcome to the Happy Mindset. Today's episode is episode number 83, and today's episode title is called What is a Polymath? So today I'm going to talk about being a polymath, what that looks like, what goes on inside the head of a polymath, what are the interests, what are the day-to-days. Just going to talk about this because chances are, if you're listening to these podcasts, you potentially are somebody who's a polymath, who's got tendencies to be a polymath, but you mightn't know exactly what that is, and you might actually be embarrassed. Not even embarrassed, you might just be a bit like uncomfortable, or you're feeling guilty about the different interests you have. You're feeling like you've got a lack of focus and you should be focused on one single field. So for me, the term polymath just made sense to me because, especially in the last few months, I've been trying to pigeonhole myself in order to make it simple for people to understand who I am and what value I can offer. And when I was doing that kind of pigeonholing, I was like, I'm a computer programmer in the day, a software engineer, and I am an author and a podcaster on the side as a hobby. And I didn't know which way to go. I didn't know whether, and in the linguistics as well, that's actually a big part of who I am as a person, and that's been a big part of my story. So I was like, what do I do with all this? And it's only been recently that I just kind of thought that polymath, that's a good fit for me. That's actually been what I've been living for a long time now, especially in the last 9-10 years. So for me, I have an interest in linguistics, computer science, also a big passion around philosophy and psychology. So I'll just explain it kind of a bit in practical terms, in kind of simplistic terms, to get a feel for what this is. Like when I read about polymaths before, I think I would have heard about maybe Thomas Jefferson. Like famous polymaths would include Leonardo da Vinci, Renaissance man or woman. That's another term for a polymath. A modern day polymath would have been Steve Jobs or even Elon Musk today as well. There's people with just, it's not even a shallow level of understanding in different fields. It's actually somebody who's got a passion for a field, multiple different fields, and they're learning it deeply. Curiosity driven. That's the way I use it in my life. It's curiosity driven. So psychology and philosophy are actually two passions in my life. They came about out of necessity, really. When I went through psychosis, that's what came into my life then. It was psychology and philosophy. And I've always used them in a way that's been practical for me. So when I approached them in that mindset, it wasn't really a field of study to me. It wasn't like the way I'd approached my degree and my master's after that. It wasn't that approach. I didn't see it as like large bodies of work to memorize and pass exams. I saw it as more of like tools that I can use in my day-to-day to simplify my life and to make it more enjoyable. So the more I actually embraced my tendencies to be a polymath, the more I actually felt more myself, and the more I felt I just felt freer in my mind to explore things. And the thing is, you can make this work practically in the world as well. I've gone through different career transitions, and none of your experience is actually wasted. I've learned stuff in my last job, which was more about fixing hardware and computers, that has helped me to understand my next job, which has been more about software development, the building website and web applications. There are overlaps between them, and the language part as well. That it's the learning how to learn has really been the underpinning, which is psychology. The psychology of learning is what I call it, or learning how to learn. So if you're somebody who's got a lot of different curiosities and you're curious about lots of different fields, if you're listening to this podcast, I would encourage you to explore that and let that play out over time. What I'd also encourage you to do is figure out what are the one or two things that are kind of key to you making progress. So for me, it's the software engineering is a key skill that I'm developing right now to help me move forward. The podcasting then is a way for me to meet a lot of different people and practice my active listening skills, which helps me as a software developer as well to communicate better with teams and other people and try to understand what do they actually want from me and how I can help them technically. So So being a polymath is, I guess in my experience, it's not something you just decide to become. It's more in hindsight you kind of realize this is what I've been doing for a long time anyway. Like I said, it was like I kind of reached a stage where I was trying to pigeonhole myself as like, I'm a writer, but then what do I do with the software engineering, and then what do I do with the linguistics? When I love all that stuff and they're all part of the experience, though the polymath word just kind of came into my awareness. Well, it had always kind of been in my awareness, but the imposter syndrome was kind of creeping up because I was kind of thinking, who am I to say I'm a polymath? It felt a bit egotistical or something. There was something about it that kind of put me off it. But I've realized it's practical necessity. It's a word that encapsulates who I am and what I do. And this podcast is for polymaths. It's for people who are curious about a lot of different things and are looking to combine things in different ways. So another person who's a polymath, somebody who's got multiple different disciplines. I think the guy who created Dilbert, and he was saying that he's not world class at any one thing, but his skills overlap in such a way that he's been average, or kind of average, maybe above average, at a few different skill sets, and they've merged into Dilbert. So that's another way to look at it. If you're not the type of person who wants to get into the top 1% or 2%, but you're also the type of person who wants to actually lead an exceptional life, the best to your ability, then potentially becoming a polymath is quite rare today. You won't meet a lot of polymaths with deep knowledge in different fields, or the drive. Just even think about it, you have the desire to have deep knowledge in different fields because you've got that natural curiosity. Like, I love philosophy and psychology. I'll read about it. I don't necessarily consider myself like an expert. Like, I won't even know all the philosophers. I know a few, the ones that have helped me. Like, Stoicism has really helped me, and reading some of Marcus Aurelius' work has really helped me because it's benefited my life. It was the biggest thing I took away from his writings was that I have the power to attach the meaning to my circumstances, and that was something that I really needed to navigate my life. Without that insight, I wouldn't have navigated my life to the extent that I have done now. So that was a key learning thing for me, and so his name won't go out of my mind because I've actually practically implemented what he was talking about. Psychology as well, I spent a semester translating Freud, and I enjoyed that. It was my first exposure really to the world of psychology, was from studying Freud's work as I was translating from French to English, which is interesting because Freud originally wrote it in German, so it was translated to French, and then I translated it to English. And so that piece was actually on the healing properties of delusions in schizophrenia. So that, in that point in my life, was very relevant to me because I'd experienced delusions through psychosis. So I was very curious about it. And as a translator, what happens is that as a translator, you're pretty much a researcher. It's just you've got a skill set of translating between languages. But in order to do that, you need to be well read in that topic. So that's what really drew me to translation. What kind of turned me off it towards the end, what made me move on from it, was I wasn't so passionate about spending hours upon hours debating words. For me, once you get the sense and the meaning of something, as a language hacker, that's what I love about languages. You can get the sense and the meaning of something, and it's communication. That's what I like about languages. I don't necessarily like getting bogged into the details of things. Even though I guess I'm developing that as a software developer now, to focus more on the small things that matter. But at the time, anyway, I wasn't as interested in that, so I moved on from the translation part of things. I still have a language passion for languages today. I still will go on Duolingo and learn new words and stuff with different languages. Learning a little bit of Japanese at the moment after reading Wabi Sabi there a few weeks ago. But that was my first exposure to psychology through Freud. Freud is an interesting character. There's a lot. He's kind of diverse, the opinions on him. But what I just took a key lesson from him was that you can learn from the delusions you experience in your life and heal from it. That was my interpretation of what I was getting from that. It was an interesting time, translating from English to French. But So that brought me to psychology. And then, yeah, it was the philosophy, and the psychology was just stuff I was applying to my life. And then I got curious about computer programming, and that came from psychology. So it was I was questioning my beliefs. So I was just looking out at the world around me, and I was like, what am I assuming about myself to be true that isn't true, factually or objectively? And I'd always assumed that I was no good at technology, because that was kind of the feedback loop I was living in. I was being told that I was no good at psychology, and I believed or computers, and I believed I was no good at computers, so that was what I was paying attention to. So I just said, I'll just challenge this, and that was back in 2013, I guess. So I started challenging that. I started optimizing my computer, very simple things. Went on YouTube, and I was like, how do you get it to run better? Just basic kind of stuff now. But at the time, it seemed like magic to me. I can remember actually going to replace the RAM in my computer, and they were going to charge like €40 for that. And I always assumed that was like I always assumed because of the price that was like something really hard to do. But I learned about it. I learned how to do it myself. It was actually quite simple. The hardest part was getting over the fear of opening up the back of my computer and inserting the chip in there. Like, it's not very, very straightforward, but it's also not very complicated either if you put a bit of time into researching it. But the biggest fear I always had around computers was that I would break it and it would be unrepairable, and like I get shouted at, or they were the real kind of blocks that I had. It wasn't actually the technicality of it. That came over time. That does take a bit of time because it isn't easy. I'm not going to lie and say that these things are easy. But if you've got a strong enough desire, you will find the resources and the people that will help you to learn this stuff if you really want to learn it. It'll be curiosity driven, so the information will stick better. And you're diving more into experiential learning as well. When I was talking about the replacing the ramen, like, those experiences are things that you don't forget because they're experienced in the real world. Like, I wasn't reading a book about inserting RAM into the computer. I was actually doing it, so I was actually feeling the fears of it going wrong, and also feeling the delight when it didn't go wrong. I didn't blow up the computer, and it actually worked, and this computer was faster because I put in the chip of RAM. So that's, as you might be feeling here, like, the world of a polymath, of somebody who's got multiple different interests, it can be enjoyable. It's not like about, in my mind, it would have been like when I thought of polymaths and I thought of Leonardo da Vinci and Benjamin Franklin and all that kind of stuff, I just thought that these were some group of people over there who are exceptionally talented, which they are. But there's a lot of other people who are polymaths in the world today that you mightn't think of, that mightn't be famous. And a good person actually to look up is Emily Wapnick. So I read her book called How to Be Everything. So she refers to polymaths as multi-potentialites. That's what she coined. That was her word for it. I actually like the word polymath, so I just kind of stick to that. But I read that book, and it just shows you different paths you can take as a polymath. She actually talked about a guy who had an IT job and who did something creative on the side, which is more, I think it was more dance or something like that. And that helped me because at the time I was fixing computers in IT. I had a podcast and I was doing some writing. Not a lot has changed since then. I've switched to the IT job for a software developer job, but I'm still doing the podcast and I'm writing. Yeah, it's getting more focused. So yeah, they're kind of the three things. And I do see them complement each other. The writing and the podcasting is more creative, and the software development is a lot more analytical and step-by-step problem solving. And it works different parts of my mind and different parts of my brain. So it's good that way. Like, I guess by practicing analytical thinking and problem solving as well, it helped me as a writer to structure a book. It helps me on my podcast to have some bit of coherence to the podcast, to the theme of it. I do believe there's quite a bit of fluidity to this podcast, even when I do these episodes myself. I don't have a script. I don't even have bullet points of what I'm going to say. I don't necessarily even know what I'm going to talk about week to week. It'll just be what's on my mind this week, and I'll talk about it, and I'm hoping that will add some value. I'll share things that have I share things that have added value to my life, just ways of thinking, ways of looking at things, just really simplifying stuff. Like today's podcast is about something that for me was something I could never be, like a polymath. I was like, there's no way I'd ever become that. But it's just actually going through a long-term process of following your curiosities, learning from trial and error, and never giving up. It's very, very simple stuff. It's not an easy process, but it's simple stuff. But it does become an easy process if you're actually focusing on the things that you're driven by curiosity and you know you won't give up, and because you actually enjoy the process. So with the podcast, I actually enjoy talking because I'm speaking about stuff that I want to be talking about in my day-to-day. In the past, and I guess even today, I feel I don't get enough opportunities to talk about the things that I want to be talking about. So the podcast gives me some time every week to talk about things that I want to talk about. And I'm actually talking to an audience that wasn't there 2 years ago. Nobody was listening to me 2 years ago. But there's a few more people listening to me today. And so I'm creating this space for me to talk and share about ideas that I would want to do anyway. So that's maybe for another episode. I'll talk about the creation process. Like a lot of misunderstandings about the creative process that I want to share about, so that it can help you to just see it as something, see the hidden benefits, I guess, to creating. Because before I started doing all this, mine was a very shallow, surface level understanding of creativity. Like I was very focused on, you need to be making money from this, and you need to have some sort of natural talent for this, and you need to have an audience to keep going, and all these kind of things that, like, in the end I realized that none of them were true. None of them were true at all. It's like you just find something that you enjoy doing it for the sake of doing it, and you keep doing that, and over time you will get better. Like, if you've really got a passion for something, and you can also develop that openness to feedback from the right sources, you'll be able to determine that over time better anyway. But if you've got that capacity there, then over time your stuff will get better. And because you enjoy it, you'll just practice it more. It'll be deliberate practice. That's the process there. So that's today's episode. Actually, another book I want to recommend is The Talent Code. The Talent Code and How to Be Everything. They're two good books to read if you are somebody who's got a tendency to be a polymath, that you've got multiple different interests and you want to explore these different interests and make things work for you practically as well. Talent Code speaks about the Renaissance and the guilds that had formed there. So it was kind of apprenticeships. It basically kind of shows you that these people we consider geniuses like Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, that there was actually guilds, there was communities forming there that nurtured that talent. So they weren't just like in complete isolation. It wasn't just some genius that wasn't interacting with the world. There was actually guilds there that were nurturing that talent there, that latent talent that needed to be developed. And another thing it talks about is the neuroscience of, I guess, talent. So it breaks down that natural talent isn't all that you might assume it to be. It talks about how you actually develop the synapses and the connections in your brain when learning a new skill. So it objectifies learning a bit better. So the more you can see learning as an objective thing rather than something subjective, it helps you to disidentify with your limitations and be open to the possibilities and opportunities that were always there. So that's what's been beneficial in my life when it comes to learning about neuroscience and neural pathways and how my brain works. It really just objectifies the thing. I realized that everybody's got a brain. It's just how you go about using that then and developing that to bring out the talent that's inside you. So that's today's episode. Hope it's been of value. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.